My life was falling apart. I lost my daughter, my will to live, everything. So I sold what little I had left and bid on a haunted-looking lake mansion at a county tax auction, a dilapidated mess with peeling paint and sagging roofs, a place so broken it felt like my soulmate. I saw a project, a reason to get up in the morning, a way to keep a promise I'd made to my little girl, Lily. It was supposed to be my sanctuary, a place to heal. But when I pulled my beat-up Ford up the long gravel drive, I found it wasn't a sanctuary at all. It was a battlefield. A bulldozer was chewing up my front lawn, and a backhoe was systematically tearing the guts out of my beautiful old porch, the one I'd pictured Lily drawing on. My heart started to pound a cold, angry rhythm against my ribs. I jumped out of the truck, the deed still warm in my hand, and walked straight toward a woman in a perfect white pantsuit, a woman who looked like she'd been carved from ice. She held a designer coffee cup like it was a scepter and a piece of paper like it was a death sentence. "Are you the new owner?" she asked, her voice as smooth and sterile as a surgeon's scalpel. "I am," I said, holding up my deed. "And I'd like to know what in the hell you think you're doing demolishing my house." She gave a dismissive sigh, a practiced puff of air that said I was a minor inconvenience, not a threat. She introduced herself as Bethany Thorne, president of the Whispering Pines Homeowners Association. "This property is under our jurisdiction," she said, waving the paper at me, "and it is severely delinquent. The previous owner owed the association a substantial amount in fees, fines, and penalties, and when you bought the property, you bought its debt." Then she handed me a bill for $142,000. My mind went blank. That was more than I paid for the entire place. I told her the title was clean, that the county sale wiped all prior liens. She just smiled that cold, tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "The county doesn't handle our private covenants," she purred. "That's a separate matter entirely. Pay the debt, Mr. Jameson, or we will finish the demolition for you." And with that, she got into her black SUV and drove away, leaving me standing in the ruins of my hope. I spent the next 2 weeks drowning in legal jargon and hollow promises. My first lawyer, a kind old man who smelled of old paper and stale coffee, told me the truth. The HOA was a kingdom built on a network of power and influence. Bethany Thorne was the queen. Her brother-in-law was the code enforcement chief, and the local judges rubber-stamped their filings. He told me they had a war chest for legal fees he couldn't possibly compete with, and that my best bet was to negotiate a settlement. He looked genuinely sorry, but it didn't help. I felt utterly alone, an outlaw on my own land. They served me with a restraining order, barred me from entry, and put up security cameras. I was under surveillance, locked out of the one place I thought could save me. That night, I slept in my truck, parked just outside the perimeter, watching the cameras watch me. It felt like I was standing guard over the last promise I ever made to Lily, a promise they were actively tearing down. I didn't feel rage anymore, just a cold, hard focus. The first crack in their armor came from an unexpected place, a grizzled old man in his garage, tinkering with a lawnmower. His name was Silas, and he'd been in the neighborhood for decades. He watched me as I drove by, not with hostility, but with a cautious curiosity. He told me about a former resident, an old veteran they hounded over the color of his mailbox until he lost his house and had to live in his truck. "I'm not him," I said, the words coming out harder than I intended. He just nodded, a flicker of something like respect in his eyes. A few days later, he walked up to my truck in the dusk, holding an old cardboard file. "This is the original set," he said, his voice low, "from 1982, before she and her cronies started changing things, illegally." He looked me dead in the eye. "Don't tell anyone where you got this." I waited until it was completely dark, the security cameras humming their silent song in the distance, and I opened the file. The pages were yellow and brittle, a boring mess of legal language. But I read every single word, my little penlight sliding across the lines until I found it, a single sentence buried in an addendum. "All liens, fines, or other financial encumbrances shall be considered null and void if not collected or legally satisfied within a period of 10 calendar years from the date of initial assessment." 10 years. The fines they were demanding went back more than a decade. It was all phantom debt, a colossal lie. My hands started to tremble, but that wasn't enough. I drove 50 miles to the county seat, to the records office, a cavernous room full of dusty ledgers where facts were stored and emotions were irrelevant. I didn't search for my house. I searched for the HOA itself, for its birth certificate. I spent hours scrolling through microfilm, tracking their corporate filings year by year. They got sloppy in the 90s, missed a filing here, a late submission there. Then after 2005, they just stopped. For nearly 2 decades, there wasn't a single official renewal, no record of a board meeting, nothing. The Whispering Pines Homeowners Association, as a legal entity, had been administratively dissolved by the state. It didn't exist. It was a ghost with a checkbook, a fraudulent empire built on fear and lies. My heart was pounding, a steady, heavy drumbeat of purpose. I hired a hungry young lawyer in the city who specialized in real estate fraud. He immediately filed an emergency cease and desist and a quiet title action, a lawsuit to make my ownership absolute and undisputed. While he was filing paperwork, I was making a power move of my own. I went back to the county tax auction website and bought 2 worthless, overgrown lots adjacent to mine for pennies on the dollar. The purchases were instant, and as I studied the old plat maps, I found it, a small, unassuming building on one of my new parcels. A building I'd discovered when I studied the original engineering schematics. It was the pump house for the entire community's irrigation system, the valve that fed every sprinkler, every boat dock, every decorative fountain in their manicured kingdom. The easement ran right through my property, and now I held the keys to the kingdom. My lawyer suggested we reach out to other residents. Silas, our first ally, helped me. We found Carl, a man fined thousands for a wooden wheelchair ramp for his wife. We found Martha, an elderly widow threatened with a lien because squirrels were leaving nutshells on her lawn. With every story, the quiet fear in the neighborhood started to turn into a slow, burning rage. Slowly, cautiously, people started signing a petition to recall the board. We got 27 signatures, more than enough. My lawyer drafted the official notice for a special community meeting, and we posted it as required by the old bylaws. Then I called a local investigative reporter with a reputation for digging into corruption. I promised her a show. The clubhouse was packed. Bethany Thorne, in a severe navy blue suit, sat at the head of a long table, looking annoyed but confident, completely in control. She tried to dismiss the meeting as a frivolous complaint by a non-member. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I just put up my evidence on a projector I'd brought. First, the county document showing the HOA's dissolved corporate status. A confused murmur went through the crowd. This organization ceased to legally exist 17 years ago, I said, my voice calm and clear. This means every fine, every lien, every foreclosure action this board has initiated for nearly 2 decades has been illegal. The room started to buzz. I put up the next document, my clean title, and after that the 10-year expiration clause from their own bylaws. The debt you claim I owe on my property expired years before I even bought it, I said, letting the information sink in. The murmuring turned to shouting. But I wasn't finished. I put up the final slide, a plat map of the entire development, with my 3 contiguous parcels highlighted in bright red. And then I pointed to the small square building on one of them. This, I said, my voice dropping but carrying across the silent room, is the pump house for the entire community irrigation system. The board's authority is based on a lie, and you have until Friday to tender your resignations and dissolve this fraudulent organization. If you don't, I will protect my property rights, and I will shut off the valve. The meeting ended in chaos, and I walked out, leaving the fire I'd started to burn on its own. I fully expected Bethany to call me to try and negotiate. She didn't. That woman was not built to surrender. The next day, I got a call from her final desperate mistake came just after 2 in the morning. I was camping on my ruined porch watching the trail cameras I'd set up. My phone buzzed. A grainy black and white image from the camera pointed at the driveway, a car, an SUV, headlights off. A few minutes later, another buzz. An image from the camera on the pump house. 3 figures in dark clothing were working on the new lock I'd installed with a crowbar. I recognized them immediately. It was Bethany, her spineless vice president, and another board member. They were trespassing on my property, attempting to commit a felony, and I had them on camera. I took my phone, walked to the main road, and made the call. It took less than 10 minutes for the flashing blue and red lights to cut through the woods. The trio at the pump house froze like deer in the headlights. The lead deputy, the same one who had arrested me just a few days ago, looked at them, then back at me. "They're the HOA board," he said, stating the obvious. "They are," I said, holding up my phone. "And they're trespassing on my private property, attempting to destroy my lock and illegally access my equipment. And this is the proof." I turned the phone around and showed him the live camera feed. He looked at the phone, then at Bethany, whose mask of cold confidence had finally shattered, replaced by pure, naked fear. The deputy wasn't listening to her sputtering about easements. He'd seen enough. He looked at his partner and gave the command. "Cuff 'em." Watching them put Bethany Thorne in handcuffs was a moment of quiet, profound satisfaction. All her power, all her bullying, all her fake authority evaporated as the cold steel clicked shut around her wrists. And as they led her to the patrol car, the reporter Sarah pulled up, her cameraman right behind her. A tip from Silas. They had been waiting down the road. The camera started rolling as the deputy read Bethany her rights, capturing the end of an empire. Justice, it turned out, could be swift. The sun rose on a different world. The police lights were gone, and the quiet returned, but it wasn't the heavy, watchful silence of before. It was a peaceful quiet. The land was no longer a battlefield. It was a job site. I started the long, slow work of clearing the debris from the demolition, and by mid-morning, a pickup truck rattled down the drive. It was Silas. He got out, pulled on a pair of leather work gloves, and grabbed a shovel from my truck bed. "Figured you could use a hand," he said, and got to work without another word. A few minutes later, another truck arrived, and another. By 10 a.m., there were nearly a dozen of them, neighbors I'd never spoken to, men and women who had hidden behind their doors just a week ago. They came with shovels, saws, and strong backs. No one asked me to pay them. No one asked for anything. They just showed up to help. A silent, powerful acknowledgement that my fight had been their fight, too. In the months that followed, we worked together, a crew of unlikely allies bonded by a shared sense of liberation. We cleared the wreckage, rebuilt the porch, and brought the house back to life. The old HOA was legally dissolved. The class action lawsuit got the residents their money back. And I even heard that the old veteran Silas had told me about, the one who lost his house, was located and received a check big enough to finally get out of his truck and into a small apartment. My final project was the dock, the one Lily had always dreamed of, a place to sit with her feet in the water and watch the dragonflies. On the day I finished it, I walked out to the end and stood there for a long time, watching the sun glitter on the water. The house was behind me, no longer a ghost but a home. I thought of the promise I'd made to her in that quiet hospital room. I'd kept it. I attached a small, simple bronze plaque to the final post. It had just 2 words on it: Lily's Reach. And you know, a few weeks ago, the reporter Sarah came back to visit. She didn't bring a camera this time. We sat on the new porch drinking iced tea. "People need to know how you did it," she said. "Everyone feels so powerless against these organizations." I looked out at the calm lake, then at the solid roof over my head, and thought about the long journey to get here. It wasn't complicated, I told her. I didn't beat the HOA with lawyers or fancy legal tricks. I beat them with a level, a deed, and a valve wrench. But a lot of people have asked me why I've decided to stay here, in a town with so much history of abuse and corruption. They say I'm crazy to keep living in a house that brought me so much pain. What do you think? Should I stay and protect the peace I fought so hard to earn, or should I leave and find a fresh start somewhere else? Let me know in the comments below.